Welcome to First Person Live, y'all. How you feeling? That's nice. That's all right.
Yeah.
Getting a little warm. This is First Person PBS, and we are having a conversation today about safe spaces and a historic safe space. We are at the Hetrick-Martin Institute, which, if you didn't know, is if not one of maybe the oldest LGBTQ services organization in the country, which has dedicated itself all these years to creating spaces for youth to feel safe, to develop, to grow. And all of us here, all of the hosts of First Person, who I'll introduce in a moment, we have a vested interest in safe space. We have come out of safe spaces ourselves. Maybe a space saved our life at some point. Maybe we were part of a space that at one point felt safe that we had to leave. Maybe sometimes we even challenged the notion that a safe space can exist. We are collectively among us artists, teachers, political activists, change makers, creators of space ourselves. So we have a lot of thoughts and feelings about the subject, and we're excited to get into the conversation with all of y'all. So I have here with me today Aaryn Lang. Tonilyn A. Sideco. Donald Shorter. And I am Kirya Traber. We wanted to talk about some of our first experiences, right, with safe spaces? Taking it way back.
Taking it way back. We were sort of thinking about this as a group before, and I definitely was thinking about being young and in high school or in middle school, and the first experience that I had as a safe space, I was in band, and I did...
Give it up for band.
Give it up for band, yes. I played the clarinet and the bass clarinet.
Yes.
And
I was a flautist.
Yes.
You were?
Okay.
Yes, I still got a flute.
And I branched out of marching band and then got into the color guard, which is, the people who twirl flags, rifles, and sabers. Yes, so you know, yes. So, I was realizing that it had became a safe space from the age of 13 to 18, being in high school, being the only person that was out, and being in a place where, I was being demoralized because of my sexual orientation, because of the color of my skin. And I realized later on in life that this space was the space where I didn't get yelled at for my sexual orientation or how I expressed myself or if I was too effeminate or the color of my skin. It was a place that I felt safe to just be able to work and develop as a young individual who was committing to something. And that space was amazing for me to be super crazy, to be outspoken and not have to fear what others would think of me. And those were formidable years to, help me develop to who I am today. So it is a space that I now go back and I am a judge, and I judge movement for these spaces.
Your same high school?
Not my same high school,
Okay.
but the circuit that my high school color guard competed in.
Okay.
So it's a very special place for me, and I'm so grateful that I can continue to keep that safe space in my life today.
And can I ask you, in that space, was it more, do you think, reflecting back, about the particular teachers you had for that program, or the people who were in it, or the whole school community, or all of the above?
I think the people who were my directors in the color guard and the marching band, I think that they were able to just see that, we want this place to be welcome to everyone.
Yeah.
And sort of if you were able to thrive in that at a place of excellence, that was the most important thing to them.
That's amazing, and it's also it's both beautiful that they gave you that, and it's also frustrating to know that there are educators that aren't like that can't see beyond the identity of the students, can't think about just educating them and working with them with their talents and skills, and are policing their gender and their expression and being outright racist. Right. I want to know other people's, though, early safe spaces. What are some things that you remember?
Yeah, I would say if I had to think of a safe space, or if I even thought things were safe spaces, it was spaces where they left us alone.
Yes.
I think. In 8th grade, I had a Spanish teacher, Miss Landis, I think. Shout out to Miss Landis. She used to let me and my best friend just sit in her room at lunch and like just play games and do whatever. And then in my senior year, I was in the newspaper and I had another teacher, shout out to Miss Johnson, hey boo, who also just let us stay in the room. And I think because where I'm from in Ohio, and I don't know if this is every school, but I just felt really, I felt like an inmate at school. Like they would tell me to find me, tell me to take my hat off, tell me I couldn't go to the bathroom when I wanted to use the restroom, couldn't just be a person, couldn't just stand in my autonomy. So I think just being able to sit in a space and not be treated like somebody that was gonna like steal all the computers or burn the like building down. It meant so much to me when I was young because I didn't have enough spaces where I felt like I was just honored or just interacted with as just like a person. And that's what made me feel safe back in the day.
Yeah, I think a lot about the older people in my life, the adults that helped create those safe spaces for me. I'd like to think that I was pretty comfortable in the spaces that I chose, but really it was the teachers and the individuals who like made it a point to talk to me like a human being.
Right.
That they didn't talk at me or talk down to me, that they actually interacted with me and wanted to know more about me.
Right.
And I think that that's such a skill now, and it shouldn't be a special skill of any of our educators.
It should be a bottom line requirement of an educator.
They're even paying these teachers,
Yeah, well, that's a whole nother conversation.
Right.
Next time on First Person.
Whole nother show.
Yeah. Well, we asked our audience some of these questions, our audience here in person. Hello, live audience. Hello, in-person audience. We asked them some of these questions, and there's some echoing. Some people have mentioned their advisory class in high school, or maybe their college, all-girls college, Mills. Shout out to Mills in Oakland.
Hey,
But then also online spaces. And so I wanted to read this anecdote specifically and see if this resonates with anyone's experience. I think it's bgclive.com.
Oh my God.
Back in 2010 to 2013, gave a Midwestern girl with no real access to gay culture space to talk, to engage with other gay folk. Was also wildly abusive looking back. But still look upon the days in general, discussions and music forum very fondly. I love this anecdote because it's complicated, right? Like I said, sometimes the spaces that we've been the most satisfied in at one point no longer serve us.
Yeah.
I mean, even I think it's interesting that like cyberspaces just weren't a thing when I was coming up, you know? I mean, I want to say when my freshman year of college.
Even the fact you just said cyberspace.
Right. But AOL was just like a thing. There was like instant messenger.
Yeah.
But nowadays, so many people can connect, you know, through the internet to create, you know, queer communities.
Yes.
It's like super interesting.
Well, I'll age myself too. Remember Downlink?
Yes.
I was on Downlink. I think it was barren by the time I got on them.
Oh, yeah.
And
It gave Wasteland.
shout out to Black Planet. Shout out to.
I only hear stories about
saying.
Black Planet.
There were all these
Changing lives out here.
There were all these spaces where, like,
Early
oh my
MySpace.
God,
I
there
was
are
just about
other
to say,
people
MySpace
that like
were my
identify the same way I do, and they're talking freely about their identity.
Yes.
They're talking about where to meet up, what clubs to go to, and then all of a sudden you're forming communities who go to the club every Monday night, and then you're like, whoa, I have friends, and it was such an amazing time. And then I remember when it got catty, and then people used that platform to talk mess about each other. And then I was, okay, now this is changing. And I think, you know, cyberbullying is still a thing, though.
Cyber is taking me out
it's just cyber. So, you know, it's
The
really
World Wide Web.
interesting. It is a double-edged sword, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
To
wow.
find community and
Yeah.
also to connect, and then to be so connected that there's more room for other types of interactions.
I'm trying to think. I was on MySpace groups. I'll age myself. I was not on Black Planet or
Downlink.
the cyberspace.
AOL. Yeah.
Things have changed. But we were all young. Like, I think looking back, like there was the person who was like the leader of this group. It was called the Killer Kids of Color. That's all K's.
I want
so it was KKK. We were reclaiming in the worst way possible. But it was like when we were all like seen, like we were wearing really like colorful clothes and listening to like really like emotional white people music. And that brought us together in a way. But we were young, so the cattiness was ever present, and I engaged wholeheartedly in the reads and the attacks and all of the things, but it did feel like family. But looking back, it was very weird to me. But when I think about like what actually does make me feel safe today, I think it's still kind of like when I was young, like being trusted in a space, like being able to hold people accountable and be held accountable. What do you all feel like are like some of the elements of safety for you all? Is it just people that share your identity, or is it people that feel good with you? Or is it people that you've actually established something with today?
You know what? Actually, I said no. So you asked, is it just people who hold my identity? I said no instinctually. But that's actually, it's like, part of my identity is my politic, which is a way of thinking and a way of being. But that's not true for everyone, right? Like for some folks, it's like, their identity is very individual. Like I am Black, I am queer, and I do me, boom, period. But for me, those are politicized identities, right? So I am Black in a way that I understand the legacy of movement building and political thought that has come before me, and queer, same thing. And so for me, that means I study about my identity, and I share, I've found the most safe spaces with other people who are also students, are scholars of our history. And I mean that in informal and formal ways, right? Like folks who are, doing the work to, whether they were raised with some of these elders in these movements and they just got it in their baby milk, or they, went and read them in books or whatever. Like, those are the places that I felt most safe. But, I mean, to me, I'm curious. Well, yeah, I'll leave it there. Yep.
Yeah, for me, there isn't one space. I find myself feeling safe in multiple spaces. And yes, sometimes I do need to see myself reflected with everyone who's around me is the same, right? But then also times I don't necessarily connect with that, and I do want to be in a safe space that has reflections of everyone, so it varies from time to time. Or if I am in a space that maybe there are other people who aren't like me, that at least I know that we can respect each other. So the idea of safe space shifts for me.
I love that.
So as long as I can feel safe that I'm not going to be verbally attacked or physically attacked, or sort of erased, then yes, that space can be safe for me, but it does shift.
Yeah, I think that's so interesting to actually break down what safety means. And I think that changes one over time in different locations and spaces. Like for me, I love what you said about like, am I physically being threatened? Is my emotional safety being compromised? And I think there's value in being in community with people who are similar to you. And there's obviously value in community where we connect along different lines. And so one thing that I've been thinking a lot about is we talk a lot about how to create safe space. And the safe spaces that I'm a part of where I feel the most safe are the ones where I don't have to talk about it. They're the ones where I don't have to necessarily establish it.
Yeah.
They're the ones where I just automatically feel seen and heard, and that respect is there. And that has happened in all different types of spaces. And so sometimes in typically social justice work too, it's like we talk so much, like it's a big game we talk. And sometimes those are the worst spaces because then we're over analyzing.
So
and
toxic sometimes.
Toxicity is everywhere. And for me, it's like I don't have the energy to then call out your toxicity and then re-evaluate and re-emerge and say, all right, well, this is what I need to create a safe space. I mean, it's just so much sometimes. And while I value it and I think that it's important, it's really hard to do that work in community with people sometimes. And maybe I'm just tired because I've been doing that for 15 years.
Okay.
I think
rock that
that's
boat.
tiring.
Right?
Whenever we pretend that everything is fixed. So, like, safety is this fixed thing because we're all saying that we all agree or we all believe in the same thing, that safety is just the name of the game and it's not something that we actually have to work on. I wanted to ask you and everybody else, like, with the not having to talk or feeling like you don't have to actually talk to the people in the spaces you feel the most safe, do you still feel like there are things that are agreed upon between you and those people?
Yeah.
Like, do you all have an agreement, whether it's spoken or just understood, of like trust in the space? Like, how is it? How do you establish that you are safe? Is it just comfort, or is it actually a thing?
I think there's a lot. I think it also depends on what kind of relationships you're building with people, right? Is it romantic? Is it community? Is it platonic? I mean, there's so many different types of trust and bonding that you can build and nurture with people. And you know, I'm a Cancer Leo, so like I like talking about feelings, you know, and like I need to be clear about stuff. So sometimes I really enjoy hashing it out and being on the same page. But often I find when people just get me, it's established maybe because of comfort, but I don't know is that just energy?
I'm realizing the word that I feel like is being circulated around. I mean, to get buzzy with it, but it's consent.
Yes.
Like, and so I'll contextualize that. And so I think there's there's also like when you were just speaking to, I was just thinking about how different it is for me when it's a professional experience versus a personal one. Though there's often overlap because of artistic projects can be a lot of collaborating with the people you love. But you know, let's pretend there's a dichotomous relationship here. And so in a professional one, I like more structure. I like to lay it all out. I literally want a list of community agreements. And I'm usually the one making them, and I'll ask for consent on them. But in a interpersonal words, that's mostly what it is. The consent is when we talk about comfort. For me, it's because there is a way that naturally, whether it's because of the home culture we were raised in, or what we have endured and how we have been shaped, what we studied politically, but there's a nonverbal similarity in the way that we practice consent. And the reason why I get down with you, and I feel, you know, I've talked about on the show before, Tony, you and I are friends. And so when we're together, there's a lot of not having to negotiate because we have a similar, I mean, we literally come from some of the same political communities and from the same regional area. We speak the same language, even when we're not speaking. So there's a lot of consent about the way we can hang out, I think.
Agreed.
The older I get, I agree completely. The older I get, the more I feel like I need to talk about stuff.
Yes.
I think I've assumed a comfort and assumed an understanding in so many spaces, and I have been so gagged when like somebody does something or says something. I'm like, wait a second, I don't know you at all, and you obviously don't know me. So the older I'm getting, I'm also learning that in order to like keep a space safe, I hate those two words next to each other more than I hate a lot of things, but to keep a space safe, like it also requires me to constantly have to be vulnerable enough to like correct somebody if I feel like they have said something wrong. And I guess that the space has to be safe. Wow, this is going to make me mad if I say it one more time. But you do have to have an open communication between everybody, because if you don't feel like you can say something, is it even a cool space to begin with, I guess?
I also find like when microaggressions occur, right? Like that, the root of that is an assumption, a stereotype, an assumption. So like if you're interacting with someone or a community or whatever, and microaggressions are happening, then like you really aren't trying to understand who I am as a person. Like that's not even on the table anymore, right? Like you're interacting with a stereotype of me or what you think I am or who you think I am. So when it's verbalized like, hey, this is what I need in order to feel safe, and once you start engaging in those conversations, then it's like, oh, we all have to establish what safety looks like for this particular space in this moment right now. And I think the more we can engage safely, with friends, family, community members, and actually be vulnerable enough to have that conversation, then I think we can finally be like, all right, yeah, that's what I need. Like, why can't I get that?
And speaking of family, I want to read another card from our audience. This is really a powerful, it's just a very short couple sentence story, but I think it brings in a whole nother level. Because for a lot of this, we've been talking more about peers and often as young people. But this person wrote, my most memorable safe space has no walls and no address. It is the moment I'm reunited with the family I have created who accepts and loves me for all that I am. If that's not a good enough answer, then I guess the bathroom has been my safe space.
I'm really touched by that.
But the notion of family, right? And I mean,
being able to create it for oneself.
Yeah, well, and also, maybe I misread this too, but I'm thinking about my birth family, my blood family. And the older I grow, the more my language changes from them. And I think about what it means. That was my first experience of safety, and sometimes my first experience of that safety being disrupted, right? So how do I return to that space, negotiate safety when we speak a different language now, knowing that I still want to, right? Because I've had people ask me, the first time I got into it really bad with one of my uncles, when my friends was like, do you still want to have a relationship with your uncle? And I was like, what? And then I'm like, okay, well, of course, I know people who don't. You don't have to. But that was so unfathomable for me, because that was my safest space. And now, there's been some repairs and some not, and I'm curious about this notion of family for you all and how that shifts this for you.
Somebody else, I can go.
I mean, I always knew that I was gay, and how do you navigate that when you have to go to church every Sunday and there's a certain message that's being presented, and then I just remember when I came out to my mom, it was just like, it was the most dramatic after school special. It was like that episode.
Same
and
here.
We weren't talking. She's looking out across the backyard with the window pane glass, and I'm like, this is not happening, and it's like, how do I exist now for this week that I have to get up and have breakfast together, and what does that mean for me? Can I exist? And for so long, my relationship with my family was compartmentalized, that I couldn't be the person that I was in New York City, and on Christopher Street, let's just say, you know what I mean? That person was not the same person that was going home to have Thanksgiving dinner, that I would take the nail polish off, or I would get a button-down shirt for Christmas, when I was like, really? Okay.
Have you met me?
And I just think now it's just been, I've just had to do a lot of work to undo a lot of narratives in my head. But I just have been able to just sort of find the courage to just continue to show up and be my authentic self. So it's an ongoing thing. It's not always, it's gotten better, but yeah.
Do you feel like there's shifts in your family's reaction as well?
Oh yeah. I think just by presenting who I am, and my work that I do, and being visible in life in that way, and I think my family seeing me receive love for who I am by so many different people, sort of kind of helps them get on board.
I think I've had a journey with my family that I think I finally gotten to a place where I'm not being so selfish, and I think it was really hard for me to recognize how selfish I was being in my interactions. I think the expectation that people would prioritize my needs over not only theirs but everyone else's was one that I hurt my own feelings a lot doing that. And I think the older I'm getting, I'm understanding that nobody is owed safety. And I think sometimes we get in these spaces, these social justice spaces, these woke spaces or whatever, and we have conversations about things that don't necessarily resonate to people who are just trying to live their lives. And I think understanding that I'm not owed safety, and I'm also not owed an understanding from people who I also don't understand. So for my family, I've been really pushing myself to, if I'm being a safe space, I've been trying to push myself to show up in the way that I would like for them to show up. I realized I wanted my entire family to understand the intricacies of my identity. I can't tell you anything about them. And I think that is something that has been kind of force-fed to us, that if our families don't completely understand us or what's happening with us, that it isn't safe. And sometimes our family members are violent, they're people. I think we get to opt in and out of relationships if we'd like to. But I also think that sometimes we need to step back and look at our families as people that are also navigating their own varying degrees of safety and what they feel safe in. So
you just dropped so many gems right now. Can we circle back for a quick minute?
Sure.
Here's some things that you said. You said no one is owed safety.
It's true.
I want you to say more on that in a minute.
I would love to.
You said I am being a safe space, or I am acting safe. You said we can opt in and out of relationships. And then you said one more, but that's all I could hold is 3.
Oh, wow, that was a lot. Okay. So wait, what was the first
No
one?
one is owed safety. What does that mean?
Okay, yeah. I don't personally believe in safe space, and I think that was something I had to do to, again, quit getting my feelings hurt.
Yeah.
Because I went into a lot of spaces with people that had similar identities to me, not necessarily similar upbringing, but I went and people would say, this is a safe space, we all got the same identity, blah, 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 blah. They still had me all the way messed up, you know, twisted in the game, all just like, y'all got me messed up, and I keep trying to think, like what was the problem in those spaces, and I think it's just the reliance on that our identities automatically makes us safe for each other. When we've lived entire lives before getting to these places, and what we think is okay and isn't necessarily in alignment. So for me, I don't really believe in safe space as much as I believe in being a person that other people feel safe around and demanding that of everyone else that I'm in close proximity to or in close relationship with. So that's the first one, but I don't want to keep talking about all 3 of them. So if anybody else wants to.
No, I'm sitting with what you had said about like family and also sitting with what you had said, and I think a lot about my mother, and I think you all know this, but my mom was not a safe space or a negotiated space. I like to think of it as negotiated, right? Because we're all navigating our
negotiated instead of safe. That
like
verbiage.
it doesn't need to be safe per se, but that it's negotiated.
I like that.
I can hear you and you can hear me, and hopefully we'll find a happy medium. That's the idea.
I love that.
But I think, you know, I also grew up in the church, and when I came out to my mother, it was not safe for me to say what I had said and told her my best friend was my partner, boo, boo, boo.
Word.
And, they loved her for a whole year before I told them. I was like, come on, it was obvious. But anyways.
Denial is strong.
Especially with Catholic Filipino mothers. So like, it was a negotiation that took, let's say, I'm going to give my age. It's about 18 years now since I've come out to my mother.
Yeah.
So the negotiation that where we're at now, I never thought would have been possible. Where she's sitting at my sister's gay ass wedding,
right?
Where she's, you know, playing with her grandchild, you know, and I think
grandchild birthed out of a gay relationship.
Yes.
Okay.
And I'm
make it plain.
Yeah, and I'm wondering about, you had said, you know, our family and, you know, other human beings in our lives, they are negotiating their own ideas of safety and wellness, and while also trying to be in relation to you and your process. And I used to be so angry, and I used to be like, Mom, why don't you just get it?
Yeah.
Why don't you just accept me? And then I realized, you know, my mom has so many demons, her own demons. And, you know, and in her Catholic guilt, trying to figure out, well, how can I love my child and at the same time negotiate safe space for them, but while I'm internalizing all this, and it's my fault that you're gay, and, you know?
Right.
So now the conversation is like, instead of like, oh, grow out your hair, it's like, hey, how are you? I miss you. And I was like, what is going on? So that growth was also in conjunction with my anger subsiding and accepting that, like, it might not ever be like, hey, I accept you for who you are, but it's like, do you and your partner need anything from Costco?
Okay.
You know what I'm saying?
That is acceptance. That's
Exactly.
That's like,
important.
this is my norm,
Yeah.
and I'm including you in it.
Exactly.
That's
But
beautiful.
no. But like I said, I blame white media.
Say more,
I
say
think-
less.
I do because
Let's go.
I think I watched a lot of TV growing up, and you know they had these grand coming out moments.
Yeah.
You know, Bobby was like, never mind. Bobby was making out with Fred, and then his uncle caught him, and then they had to have a whole big conversation. It's like, Daddy, why won't you accept me? And it's this big thing. It's like I had a single mom who was tired from working, trying to make sure I had a house over my head, had food, I was able to go to school and things. The situation just wasn't the same, but what I expected from her was the white media's idea of me, one, even needing to come out, that needing to be like a thing, and it immediately put my mother on enemy lines. So that is how I approached it. I approached it like she wouldn't accept it. And I just think she was confused. And fear is a huge thing, I think, for people of color and their kids.
Yep.
They want us to be safe so badly. When we come and we're like, honey, I want to be a whole, like, giraffe with a lingerie bra. Like, you know, I want to be out in the world butt naked dancing in the streets. Like, they're like, you know, I need time with that. Like, you've had a whole process around it, but you're telling me today and expecting me to be
On your page.
where you aren't even at yourself.
Yeah.
Like,
Right.
I hadn't accepted it when I wanted my mom to accept it. And I was young, but I understand that now, how important it is now in a way that I didn't then.
Absolutely.
And I
Amen.
misunderstood her confusion and fear as a lack of love. And I think that is also the white media, you know, telling us that if your parents don't fully understand you, if they can't this or that they actually don't love you, when the love never changed. She was just confused, and we both were mad about it. So, you know, things happen, but we're good now.
Hey.
Hi, Mom.
Hi, Mom.
This hair is inspired by her, in
Yeah.
fact. This
It's
is
so
her
cute.
signature, not mine. But yeah.
Yeah. Well, something that I wanted to go back to too is, you know, I think you and I talked about before, and you mentioned just now that we have some sort of itchy feelings about safe space, and you just offered another term, negotiated space, another term that I've used in my facilitation work. I didn't make it up, but it's been around, coming up in the zeitgeist of political organizing and students and da-da-da. Brave space versus safe space. But what both are sort of calling on is this: when we have the capacity, the energy, the time, we talk about it explicitly.
Yeah.
And I think it's so interesting. Like I'm remembering what you said before, Tony, about you know, how exhausting it is to do movement work. Amen. And then
Trash, honey.
and then what you're saying about the patience you now wish you had for your mom and now have for your mom. And I'm wondering, is that what we're missing in movement work? Is patience for each other?
We're missing so
We're
much.
missing a lot. We're missing a lot.
We're missing so much, honey. Patience is definitely one of those things.
Yeah.
I think patience with oppressed people, navigating their trauma and trying to fight their oppression at the same time. I think patience is really important. I also think we have a huge lack of focus on like mental health. And I think we are literally like navigating just a minefield every single day, and then we get in this space with people who some white foundation has thrown a couple dollars at, thinking that they are literally God, running and organizing a nonprofit space and giving everybody hell. And people aren't supposed to be busting out or, you know, going to the internet and calling people out or killing themselves. You know, it's dark, and people go. I think the myth of safe space has drawn a lot of people to social justice spaces, thinking that because we share a similar political ideology, that you're also not gonna like stab me in my back or harm me. And that's just not the case. And that is another reason I hate the idea of safe space, because it forces people to thirst for something that they don't necessarily understand, that they actually have to create themselves. Like, you actually have to be proactive in creating a safe space. And if you're actually not a person that people feel good around, it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
But I really want us to, narrow down, because I think in these negotiated spaces or in these assumed spaces, again, there are some things that are very clear that I think everybody can take with them. And I would love to hear some of the thoughts you all have had, or some of the experiences you all have had, so people could take them and use them for themselves.
And I'd like to pepper in 2 questions that
Yes,
actually will
please.
help us with that. One is very much what you just said. How do you go about healing trauma within a safe space? Sharing
Please.
trauma and unsure of reactions, i.e. if triggers occur. And then the second is, how can you create safety given the ever-changing language and concepts around emotional safety?
Wait, can we run those back?
Yep.
Yeah.
So the first one, how do you go about healing trauma
Okay.
within a safe space, which is sort of what you were just speaking to? We are all traumatized. We are. I would argue that every human being, you come out the womb, that's trauma. It's like, what? It
Listen.
was so
I
warm
didn't
in
ask
there.
for this.
But then some, more than others, and particularly those of us that are considered to be social pariahs, etc. So how do we, in a space that's supposed to be safe, maybe it's a movement space, maybe it's a artist space, maybe it's just a campus group like a Gay Straight Alliance or a advisory class or whatever, how do we heal trauma in that space and deal with triggers when they come up? That's one question. And then another question is related to that. I think it's more on the sort of planning side. How can you create safety given the ever-changing language and concepts around emotional safety?
Gosh.
Sort of how do you create this first question, talking about creating a space where we can talk about our trauma that we have, I love drag. Drag has definitely been a safe space for me. Clubs being able to perform drag, but then exist. Essentially when I first started doing drag, it wasn't about performing. It was about being able to be in a space where I could just wear a dress.
Yes.
I would go to Julius's, I would take this bag of clothes, go to Julius's, and then have the bartender make me a martini. And when I come back out, I would literally just have on the dress. And I would just sit there and drink the martinis.
That's a ritual you just described.
You know what I mean?
I love that.
And it wasn't about performing, right? And then those spaces were places that I could just feel comfortable in who I was. And then I decided to continue to investigate what drag performance meant. So I've been doing drag for quite some time. And recently, there's the younger queens. I love it when they keep Francesca in mind. Warms my heart. They had asked me to perform. These queens of color, young queens of color, had created a night called Reparations.
Yes.
And for the premiere party, they had asked Francesca to perform, and they said, could you please perform something that speaks to your experience of being a queen of color? And so in that night, I could see from the younger queens to the older queens that we were all referencing our idols, whether they be from ancient times or to current times, but then talking about our experience as we're seen, but then also being in a space where we're running the party, we're booking the party, we're the DJ, we're the promoter, we're making the money, that was, and to be able to sort of hear music that was representing who we were, sort of was really amazing just for me to sort of sit back and say, wow, the kids are doing it. They're like,
Kids are all right.
you know what I mean? The kids are all right, and they're inspiring me.
Yeah.
So in that space, I could see how we were all sort of looking at our trauma via our performance, avenue. So that was something that I was able to take away from that, and I was able to share sort of Diana Ross sharing about who her idols were and how important it was that all of these people were writers or painters, and that inspired her. So.
Can I make 2 nuggets out of what you just said
Yeah.
in terms of tips? Like if anyone at home is taking notes. So you said you created a ritual, which was, had a system. I got my bag with my dress in it. I go to the same bar. I tell the bartender martini, Dry, mixed, dirty? How? What?
Olives.
Olives. I go in the back, I change, I come and sit, and I have my drink. That's a ritual right there, like, praise be. And then the second thing is just honoring your lineage and having the space to do that. That's healing. That's beautiful. Thank you.
Word.
I think I have to go back to the expectation that spaces can heal emotional trauma. So I think it depends on what kind of spaces, right? So like I'm maybe this is an assumption, but like, you know, for people in the audience, I know that like a lot of us are participating in the creation of safe spaces, right? So emotional trauma is going to come up regardless of whatever space that we're in, right? We're human beings and we're negotiating space and we're in it with each other. And also, I would say in today's political climate, we are in it with each other and not in it with each other, and we are all over the place. So emotional trauma is going to come out in all these different ways. Sometimes it's somatic, sometimes it's like mental health, physical wellness, sometimes it's, you know, like actually like acting out, whatever that means, right? So my question is, what are the responsibilities in the safe spaces that we create, right? Are they being funded by institutions? Are they being funded by nonprofits? Are they being funded by capital? Like, what?
Are there deliverables?
Exactly. Are there deliverables that we have to say we did X, Y, and Z? Or are they being negotiated in ways where it's like, hey, we are holding space and we are here with each other and I can hold space for you. And I think that's what, for me, I'm assuming that young people want a space for them, like just to be seen and heard. Back in the day, this was like over 15 years ago, I was director of Queer Youth Services, where I worked at a nonprofit housed at a high school. And my job was to help young people train educators and the principal on how to create safe spaces at their school. So my job was to support the young people in all the emotional trauma they were experiencing, trying to train adults with all their microaggressions.
And you were by yourself?
And I had a team, I had a squad, but it really was, but then it was,
you know what
like,
they do? Oh, we just gave you this new job for $5.
It was like along the intersections of race and class and all
So
that.
proud
So
of
I
you.
was the queer, whatever. So one of the most beneficial things that I think I got from that job and what I learned was that the young people really just needed a space to be able to talk. And to talk about what they're experiencing so they can continue to do the work. So if you uplift and amplify what it is that they think they need and want and what they want to create, that is what's going to work. Not what you think is going to work and then you tell them, well, this will work. No, just giving them that space. Okay, what do you need? Markers, butcher paper? Great. Okay, what else do you need? When the emotional trauma comes up, and they start, trying to navigate that with each other, let them have their space. Let them hash it out. And then step in should you need it. But
if they start throwing shoes.
They're figuring it out. And I think growing up, if I had the space to just figure it out without being told how to do something or how to navigate something, then I think I would have been way better off because I would have learned my way into the answer.
You said that right at the top, Aaryn.
Yeah.
You said they left us alone. They opened the room and they left us alone.
That's still very valuable to me to this day, being left alone.
Yes.
It is,
After the show, don't
Leave her alone, y'all.
right, cat.
You got that?
Right. No. I don't know what I was about to say, so yeah. Well, okay, I guess I should remember that no one else knows what they were about to say.
Well, I could jump in with a tip, which is, it's not unlike what you're saying, but I think whatever the space is that you're trying to create or be a part of, it's understanding that the only constant is change. And that's true in the context of movement building, of healing, of art making. And so if your space does not have the capacity for change and shifts, then it cannot be safe or brave. People cannot take risks.
Or sustainable.
Or sustainable. And so how can you, whatever you need to do, how can you build a space or program or a group that is flexible, that is malleable to the changing needs of the individuals involved in it and the changing seasons and all that. And that might take more funding, that might take a different physical space. Like maybe this room won't work. You know, sometimes it's that. Sometimes it's literally like, we need to move up, right? And then sometimes it's like, oh, maybe we have to allow that person to come 20 minutes late every time. Maybe we have to have childcare. Maybe, you know, what is it?
Yeah, no, I think what you said, what you both said, is probably the clearest, like, most succinct thing about space in general. Like, just being willing to adapt and understanding that, like, people can't come to this space and heal. Like, I think that's also too tall of an expectation from the people going to the space and people creating space. You can be a conduit for change, you can be a conduit for healing, but you cannot just create a space that everybody's going to come to and leave like, oh my God, centuries of trauma gone. Thank you so much. I'm going to tell all my friends. I think understanding that everything is a tool. Everything can be used as a tool, and people can model the tools or just model safety for people or just model comfort for people, as opposed to like, I'm actually going to heal you.
Right.
Did you know that when
Right.
you came here, I was going to heal you? I think we have to let that expectation go. And quit trying to play God and just play Becky, you know, play Becky that's got an office and some butcher paper and some pencils. Be the best Becky with those things, you know. Don't come trying to be Iyanla and fix everything for everybody, you know. I think when we let those things go, we actually get to show up all the way. When we let go of the BS. I'm doing so good at not cussing today, y'all. But yeah, when we let go of that, you know, a safe space can be born.
Can I make it a little more narrow? This is another question from the audience. Is what would you tell a young person about creating safe spaces? Right. And so I'm wondering, particularly, is something we would say to our younger selves, you know, 13, 14, 15. I feel like I've said this multiple times. I would say it starts with you. Whatever it is that you are looking for, model those things. Make sure that people can hold you accountable. Make sure that if you try it, that you're not a person that is going to get so defensive that the person's hurt doesn't get to exist anymore. And then it becomes about making sure you feel okay. But also I would say be willing to go out of just identity similarity. I think looking for people who have similar interests as you is a great way to find comfortable, braver spaces that you can actually go in and probably have some influence in. Like video games, like the gaming community is disgusting. They're awful human beings by and large. And I love video games. So like I'm actually right now like, am I actually about to be like the social justice person in the in the gaming community?
in the fighting game group? Like, you know, y'all are being real disrespectful in here. But
they need you.
I think as a child, I need to do something else with my time than that. But I think yeah, just trying to find places that you enjoy, because I think sometimes we gravitate towards people that we think are like us. So we end up going into social justice when that might not actually be what you want to do. You might not want to be at a nonprofit. Right. You might not want to do the things that people say that people like you are supposed to do. I think being willing to go where your enjoyment and your happiness is, that's also the first part. Go somewhere that you enjoy being. So you can enjoy being there and being like just interacting with people. Because if you don't want to work at a nonprofit, if you actually don't want to go to the march, you might be at the march with the attitude. And then don't nobody want you at the march. You're only at the march because you think people want you there because y'all are all the same. Go somewhere where you want to go. So if you actually like crocheting like bras, go to the crocheting convention and see how you like those people first. And then see how you get along. I think we limit LGBT youth to these very trite conversations and spaces where they go and they end up getting mentally stifled because we're constantly like pouring on them that this is actually where they're safe. But it's not true, because Becky is getting a check from somebody, and when she clocks out of everything, including how much she cares about y'all. So I think go ahead.
That's
and
not
just,
necessary.
I'm sorry, Becky. I don't know why you're the one today, but you know, you're on my mind and in my spirit.
Wow.
But yeah, I think we limit LGBT youth, and I think you bringing up art, like, do your art, boo. Like, if you like to twerk, you want to be a stripper, do all of the things you want to do and find your people there. Because too often we get people with very different experiences. Sorry, I'm going on a tangent, but we get people with very different experiences, very different interests, and we throw them all in a conference or a room and say, hey, you're a bunch of trans people. You're going to love each other. It's like, that's actually not the truth. Like, everybody in here is awful. Like, and nobody wants to talk about bra crocheting with me. So it's just like, go where your interests are first.
I love bra
and try to
crocheting.
create spaces. Try to create spaces within spaces you already want to be in. That would be my advice to the babies. And run. If they say they're going to heal you, run. If they say that it's a safe space, run. Like, go places where there is work demanded of you and everybody in the space. If it's supposed to be ready just when you get there, you're probably going to gag in a couple months, boo. Let me be the one to tell you.
Oh, that's
just
true.
run.
That's true. That's true.
I mean, I guess for my 13-year-old self, I would just say go where it's warm, where it feels warm. Like
I
probably
sweat a lot.
bring a towel. No, I would definitely say like go to where it feels warm. And
Right,
then
I'm hot right
the older person in me says, don't be afraid to be the person to create what you want.
Yes.
I was gonna say something similar. Yeah.
You know, like I think now I'm in a place where it's like, okay, create. If it's not happening, don't rely on anybody else and create the space you want to exist in.
Yeah.
You know, and that may take time. That might mean some like putting in some elbow, you know, like getting it going. But that's what I've seen. I lived in Bushwick for 10 years and I saw these kids like making spaces.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, maybe this is gentrification, but you know what? The kids are making it. But the kids are making it.
Maybe
You know what I mean?
safety.
Maybe,
Maybe
but spaces have been made by people who wanted spaces
Yes.
for themselves.
Yes.
Okay.
So that's sort of what I was able to take from my time living in Bushwick.
You were talking earlier about risk taking.
Yeah.
That like maybe a safe or negotiated or brave space requires that people feel like they can take risks. And I think to me that means emotional risk taking. Like, and it's so true. Like if you walk into a space and you know, and granted, anxiety is a whole nother thing. Like I walk the world with anxiety, let's be real.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of that is like just an internal thing, and a lot of that is because I've been told that I am not welcome in this world in a lot of
Right.
other spaces.
Right.
So, you know, it's valuable for me to find the spaces where I can just be comfortable, be my authentic self, whatever that means in that particular moment. And I value the places, the people, mostly, the people that allow me to take risks with my emotions, that I can say how I feel, and I'm not gonna be judged for it, but we're gonna talk about it, and we're gonna like navigate it. And you know, I really appreciate what you said. Like, it really does start with you. Like, if you cannot be that for other people, you can't expect the same thing in return. And
That
so
don't mean you don't expect people to try you. Okay, it
Yeah,
doesn't
yeah.
mean accept
Yes.
disrespect because you messed
no,
up.
no. And then I'm too old for that now. But like,
Yeah.
but like being able to say in a space like, hey, this is what I need to feel all right. Like, can you do that? And if you can't, all right, I'm gonna walk away because if
And no disrespect, I just need something else. Thank you.
Exactly.
Goodbye.
Exactly. Thank
Yeah.
you and
Good
goodbye.
night
Or
and good
good
luck.
night
Yeah.
and good luck. Yeah.
I'm really touched by that, but
I'm really touched by that. Well, bye.
Shout out
And
to
I
Sophia.
really shout out to Sophia over there. And it, you know, there's this question too about like, you know, how do you create safe spaces in places that aren't social justice, you know, social justice places, institutions, and I
Right.
think what you said was the answer. Is that start from where you're at.
yeah.
wherever you're at, like if you can figure out how to be that safe space for yourself, because let's be real, I'm not always a safe space for myself. I don't always do what's healthy for myself. And if I prioritize that, I think people see that and they get a pass to like, oh, well, that person's in their alignment and that person's in their power and in their safety. Like, I could do that for myself too.
Yeah.
And like, when we start talking about that, I think we're creating that in the moment. And we don't necessarily have to like talk about it all the time, but we're just doing it already.
Yeah, you reminded me of something. I don't know how we're doing on time though. We're supposed to.
Yeah,
okay.
honey.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
We're great.
We're great. Okay, good. So I wanted to say that this reminds me, it's actually something we talked about in our first live episode this season in terms of what we were talking about our professional industry and entertainment and like what we accept from that space sometimes for the sake of success and whatever, and talked about making compromises. And that's just reminding me, it's, you know, if we are only going to social justice spaces for safety or risk taking, we're dumping all of that there, all that baggage, all that, and then we go out in the rest of the world and we like suck up our pelvic floor and have a terrible time and feel awful, and then we go back to social justice space and go bleh. And so we really have to expect the same, which means learning how to say in different languages, I need this, I won't accept this, what do you need from me? I can give that, I can't give that. Everywhere, negotiating everywhere,
Hell no.
contracts, okay?
Yes.
Literally.
They laughed at Cynthia Bailey when she pulled out that friend contract. Mind you, I've been revisiting that in my adulthood. Like, you know, there are some terms for relationships with me that I think need to be on paper.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, why not?
Yeah.
Why not?
Because I want friends, and I don't want people to get scared. Here's your contract, honey. Read it.
Sign on.
Get it back to me in about 48 hours.
What advice would we give to Cardi B and Nicki Minaj about safe space?
Oh my God.
That was a
you have
question.
thoughts.
That was a
That was
question.
an audience
Someone
question.
wrote that down. That was from the
I know you
audience.
have thoughts on this.
This
so
is important.
This is important.
This
We were
is very
talking about this
important.
earlier.
So what I will say to both dear old Nikki and Barty is that, you know, don't ever take off your shoe or get a knot for somebody who does not have a resume like yours. So if you cannot compare y'all's resumes, y'all don't actually have anything to fight about. Though I enjoy it as a spectator very much and keep up the good work, the media needs something other than men being violent. We get enough of that. So women, I love women fighting. I'm sorry.
Oh my God.
It's literally, I feel like black women are never allowed to be angry. So there's something in me that I just enjoy public rage from black women. Everything black women do is so, you know, everybody's like, why can't women just, we're trying to, no. These are MCs. I want them to come for each other. That's the name of the game. I think it's amazing. But I don't think they really have anything to fight about. Just because, you know, Nicki is the Nicki Minaj and Cardi is now the Cardi B. Like, y'all can just give each other side eye. Did y'all see Aretha and Patty? Aretha Franklin moved out of the way of Patti LaBelle's handshake in the White House. That's the level of shade. That's legendary shade. That's legendary.
Repeat.
Everywhere I go, I'm myself. I don't gotta fight you, heifer, but I don't speak to me like we cool in public. Just for these white people. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
That's the level of authenticity I love. So, you know, I think they're great. They're doing great, sweetie.
I think there's a way
I don't
that
think that answered the question.
No, but I think you actually tied it back to what we're talking about. We're talking about find the places where you're warm, and when you're not in that place, say thanks but no thanks.
Or, you know.
Or throw your shoe.
Throw a shoe.
Yeah, set it off.
Rip a dress, you know. Get put in a headlock. We all have different processes. Cardi's is just much more gutter. I appreciate her so much for that. But you know, there's a light skin thing happening there.
Absolutely.
That's a different conversation.
Absolutely. That
Because,
is.
you
Next
know,
time on First Person Live.
Yeah.
Next time, could cupcake and Megan Thee Stallion get in a fight at Harper's Bazaar, they would have got arrested. Yes, it's true. Does anybody love Megan Thee Stallion? I do. Okay. But unfortunately, everyone, we have reached our time here today. We're so happy that you all decided to join us for the very last live First Person episode of the season. We've been doing this now since June of 2017, so we're facing the end of 2018, and it's a very bittersweet moment for all of us. So I want to thank the Hetrick-Martin Institute for allowing us this space. I want to thank my lovely co-host for continuing to crack me up and be as ridiculous as I am on this show. I want to thank you all for being here and laughing with us and engaging with us, and
our audience for watching.
Oh my God. And
Thank
the people
you.
that aren't here with us, thank you for continuing to watch, and please read us in the comments or say whatever you need in the comments to us.
Gently, please. Gently.
Not
read us.
gently. Give it to us. You
Give
know.
it to Aaryn.
It's
Give
the
it
last
to Aaryn.
one. It's the last episode of the
No,
season,
you're right, you're
honey.
right.
Really let us know it. But yes, thank you so much. And until next time. Bye-bye. Auf Wiedersehen.
I felt the need to be some kind of support for people like me. And in this building at the time, there weren't. And I felt like students needed that.
These group of friends I met here in the GSA when I joined, we all just really support each other.
My desire to help, on the surface, it came from a place of I want to help people and I want to affect change, and I'm really interested in human behavior.
Folks who are undocumented, TGNC, out there in the world, like finding community is a key aspect or like a key way of remaining alive and like remaining like grounded.
My favorite thing about them is I don't have to be in the room, but if somebody has something to say about me, they're quick to, defend me.
I need them to understand that I had 1,000 reasons to give up in high school. So yes, I am a strict dean and I'm hard on them and I'm always making sure that they're following the rules. Because out there, when they graduate, no one's gonna be there like that for them.
What you get for saying you had the beastie? You're 19 years old. I'm trying to go see my girl.
What we're finding now more than ever is that chosen family can be just as powerful as the family that you're related to genetically.
It was great to just being there and being supported and being seen and called by as Mateo. And it was a great experience.
I need my kids to have a place to go, a safe space. And especially a lot of our alumni come back and always tell us how much they miss our school building because we're like a family. And I want them to know that I'm just trying to prepare you for what's out there.